The Senate could vote tonight on a government funding bill to avoid a partial government shutdown. The new package replaces DHS funding with a 2-week stopgap measure. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments are our panelists, Jason Palmer, the co-founder of Together, and Kate Monroe, which is a Republican strategist and a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. Thank you both for joining us. As I just mentioned, Senate Democrats and a few Republicans today blocked a package of government funding bills that included DHS funding. Let's listen together to both sides of the aisle on the issue. Here's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Majority Leader John Thune. Listen.
It's now on Leader Thune to separate out the DHS bill, just as Speaker Johnson did in the House, and start working with Democrats to rein in ICE, imposing oversight, accountability, and empowering local law enforcement in our communities.
Government shutdowns don't benefit anyone. I've said this many times before. And so, in my view at least, and I think the view of all of us, we ought to pass the package on the floor, fully fund the government, and move on to other things that the American people expect us to work on.
So senators are now changing their strategy. They're now working to pass the funding package with only a 2-week extension of DHS funding. Jason, we'll start with you. Democrats are demanding changes to ICE and the CBP following the fatal shootings in Minnesota. What exactly are Democrats demanding here? And do you see any realistic compromise possible in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think there is a possible compromise. Everybody that's seeing what's going on in Minnesota thinks this has gone too far. There's a reason why thousands of people are marching in the streets. Millions of people have seen the video of Mr. Preddy being shot 10 times while he was on the ground, while he was actually under the control of those border control or ICE officers. But I do see a possible compromise here. There's a new spirit of bipartisanship in Washington. We will no longer have ICE personnel walking around wearing masks. They will actually be required to use the same use of force standards that normal police officers have to use when they're apprehending people on the street. There's going to be a requirement for judicial warrants, body cameras, just like regular police officers, and also they'll have to have visible identification. They will have to have their name on their uniform, just like anybody else who's apprehending people on the streets. There's no more Gestapo in America.
Kate, what are your thoughts on what Jason had to say, and what do you think about the overall demands coming from Democrats on this issue?
Well, I think there's a totally separate thing of funding DHS versus what they want to see happen down on the street level. It's sad to see. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Obviously, we don't want to see any civilian get shot ever, not by a policeman, not by Border Patrol, not by CBP. But that doesn't mean that you can have a completely lawless group of people out on the street. At some point, you create chaos by what happens on the media, and what these lawmakers are saying drives everyday ordinary people out to the street to do things that could end their life. So while you never want to see things like this happen, it's going to continue to happen if we don't tell people to stay at home and stay safe. It's scary to see really people standing up when, ICE is going to detain someone who may be harming children, and we have people, trying to stop ICE from picking these people up. I think people don't really know what they're fighting for. I think a lot of these people are paid. So I would like to see DHS get funded, but I do think there's a better way to do this down on the ground.
Now, Border Czar Tom Homan held his first press conference since he's took over the immigration operations in Minnesota. He said that ICE operations could scale back if agents are allowed in local jails. Let's together listen to what Homan had to say.
More agents in the jail means less agents in the street. This is common sense cooperation that allows us to draw down on the number of people we have here. Yes, I said it. Draw down the number of people here, because we have the efficiency and safety of the jails and the prison. Matter of fact, I have staff from CBP and from ICE working on a draw down plan.
Jason, with Homan now pushing for this cooperation between ICE and the local law enforcement, what do you think is driving the resistance to cooperating with ICE to begin with?
Well, the main reason for the lack of cooperation before is because ICE was doing raids in the middle of the night, wearing masks, not letting local law enforcement know where they were going to be. I mean, honestly, it was like the Wild West in Minneapolis just a few days ago. Now, all that said, I think Tom Homan actually has come forward with a good plan. He's saying that ICE will draw down significantly, and there are more than 1,500 jails and prisons across the country that have what are called 287G agreements with ICE to actually exchange prisoners when they reach the end of their sentence, or even sometimes when they're just awaiting trial. And that is sensible. I mean, that's the thing that the American people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump, is they wanted to have criminals deported. And so this is actually a good compromise. Get all of the ICE personnel out of the streets of Minnesota where they're interfering with the lives of regular citizens, and start focusing on the criminals that are in jails and prisons.
Kate, I'd like to hear your thoughts real quick on what you think is driving the resistance to cooperation with ICE.
Well, I think a lot of the resistance that you see across the country depends on the leadership in that particular area. You know, if that area is trying to protect those illegal migrants, you're going to see calls to actions to get people to come and protest and do the things that you see end up ending their lives. I think a lot of it is from the top down. And from the top down, if they're saying, hey, everyday police force, don't go out and cooperate, then it causes even more chaos. It's very sad to see what's happening on the streets. I do think some type of drawdown. I don't think we should get rid of ICE altogether. I think there's a happy medium. And yes, we should be able to go in the jails, but that doesn't mean that there's not still these criminal illegal migrants in these homes that we do still need to get. So if we can draw down the number of these ICE agents, pick up all the criminals and get out of there and move on to the next city, I think that's what we need to be doing. There's enough chaos with all of the fraud and illegitimacy and everything going on in that state. It's absolutely it is the Wild West for many reasons.
Kate, under this new strategy that Homan has put forth here, do you think that states like Minnesota would actually see fewer protests and less tension if local law enforcement coordinated more closely with federal authorities?
I think you'll see a little bit less. I mean, eventually, a lot of these protesters that are paid are going to end up, it's going to dry up the funds to keep these people out there. Many of them will tell you that they're paid. As long as somebody's willing to pay them, they're going to be willing to go out there and do this work. But I do think that the less of them there are, the less ICE, the more police there are, the less protesters there will be. But there will still be protesters as long as ICE is there.
Jason, what do you think?
I agree with Kate that as long as there's ICE, there will be protesters, but there's no evidence at all that these people are paid. People are riled up who are regular citizens because they're seeing other citizens being killed in cold blood just for holding up a cell phone. In America, you have your freedom of speech, you have your freedom to protest, you have a freedom to hold a cell phone up and video things that you think that are illegal that are going on. And those protests are going to keep going until ICE is out of there.
Let's talk for a moment about this issue of the paid protesters, because this seems to be a point of contention not only between you two, but also on Capitol Hill, where I spend most of my time. Kate, where have you seen evidence that these are paid protesters? Can you talk to our audience about that?
Well, I mean, just personally here in San Diego, when I'm walking down on the coast and I see hundreds of people holding signs, when I go through and I go on a walk and I talk to these people, I'll ask them what brought them all out. They'll say who that they are working for. They are all of them paid. When I was at the riots, I talked to a couple hundred people that were bussed there, all of them with the exact same signs, the same shirts. They didn't go coordinate themselves. They're not in high school doing a rally. They got paid to go there. It's very obvious. Kash Patel just came out to say that they found 5 or so different groups paying for these people to be on the ground in Minneapolis and other places. So I think we can sit and pretend that it's just your everyday citizens out in the cold, everyday citizens just out in their cars, getting shot. But that's just not the case. And it's not just the people getting paid. It's also the negative rhetoric coming from the media and from the top-down leadership in Washington that could be driving some of these everyday people out to protest.
Jason, earlier you mentioned that you sort of agree with the strategy that Homan has put in place here. If jail cooperation allows ICE to reduce the number of agents operating on the streets, wouldn't that improve public safety for everyone?
Yeah, that's partly why I said that I think Tom Homan is coming in with a reasonable plan. If ICE draws down 90% and Minneapolis signs a 287G agreement to allow ICE to actually take undocumented immigrants from their prisons and jails, that's a sensible compromise. Now, all that said, what Kate was just saying about the rhetoric in Washington, that has caused this problem. We need to get those ICE agents unmasked, wearing badges with their names, under the same types of rule of force rules that govern all police officers that operate on the street. That would, immediately stop the protests because it would be a big change. And I'm glad to see the Democrats in the Senate pushing for that.
Yeah, we'll be watching that vote closely. Lastly, Kate, I want to ask you, ICE leadership has reportedly instructed officers not to engage with agitators. What impact could that have on enforcement overall?
I mean, I don't think that they should engage with agitators unless an agitator is standing in between them and their target. It's very difficult. I go out and do investigative journalism, and sometimes people, put things in my face and shove me and want to scream at me in my face. And as a Marine Corps veteran, don't think that there's not part of me that doesn't want to do something about it, because we're just human beings. But I think that, these men and women are trained well enough where they do need to hold back some of that. They need to allow the regular police force on the ground, where there are police. But it is hard. It's hard to say what you would do. People always say, well, I would have done blah, blah, blah. Well, you've never had to do it. So it's hard. You can say what you do, but I think, that's just a lot of conjecture for most people.
All right, Kate Monroe and Jason Palmer, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. We appreciate your time.